Hey, Tyler here for BleepinJeep.com. We're going to take a little break from Project Tetanus this week, but we are going to be working on a Comanche. This is my other 87 Comanche. It's the long bed, and I've been having a little bit of an overheat problem, and I think I've located the cause, so this week we're going to fix that. So what happened is I've been driving this thing since I bought it pretty much every day. But it's just been around town. I mean, the farthest I've gone is probably 30 miles. And I've not had any overheat trouble until a few weekends ago. I took a trip up to see my brother, and it was about a 2.5-hour drive on the freeway. When I got up to freeway speeds, the temperature kept climbing and climbing. I had to stop. I got up to about 230 degrees, and I had to stop and let it cool down so I wouldn't burn it up. And what I discovered is when I would slow down and go through traffic in town, the temperature would drop. As soon as I'd get out on the freeway and start pushing 65, 70 miles an hour, that temperature would keep climbing right back up again. So initially I thought maybe I had a bad fan clutch, and I replaced it just in case. I mean, it's a $20 part, and I'm sure it's never been replaced. But that didn't solve my problem. So then I got looking, and this is still warm, so I'm not gonna take this radiator cap off. By the way, important safety tip: never, ever, ever, ever take the radiator cap off when the motor's still hot. Otherwise, you're gonna get a face full of exploding, scalding liquid that's gonna burn your face off. So I pulled the cap off, and I could see little bits of metal shavings that had collected in here in the cap. Sometimes when you get, you can stay cool at lower speeds, but when you get up to freeway speeds and you're overheating, sometimes that can mean you've got a bad water pump. Now this has about 140,000 miles on it. I'm sure this is the original pump. It's never been changed. So I am pretty sure that's what my problem is. So I'm going to put a water pump on this today, and hopefully that'll fix our problem. The color of the coolant, other than those little metal shavings in it, looked really good. However, I am still going to flush this out just for good measure. I'm also going to put a new serpentine belt on. This one is starting to crack. I got to pull it off to service the water pump anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and put a new belt on as well. If you look right here, right along the ridge, this is little bits of metal. There also are some here on the inside of the cap. So I am pretty sure we got a bad water pump. First thing I'm going to do is remove the fan shroud to give me a little bit of room to work. There's 4 sheet metal screws that hold it in place. This is a 8mm. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the fan and the fan clutch. That's going to allow the shroud and everything to come out. These are 1/2 inch or 13mm will work on these nuts here. Now to get to the other ones, if you'll just take a pry bar, you can gently rotate the water pump like this. Bring those up to the top where you can get to them. You can use the same pry bar to keep the clutch from turning if you need to get more torque to break these loose. Now I recommend that you always replace your fan clutch if you're replacing your water pump. You have to pull it off anyways, and if you've watched Matt's video on overheating, sometimes it can be hard to tell when that clutch is worn out. It's a real inexpensive part. They're about 20 bucks. It's just worth it. If you're going to go to the trouble of pulling your water pump off, put a new fan clutch on there too. the fan clutch. If you'll rotate this 90 degrees, it should come out. Okay, let's get that belt off and get after that pump. So the next thing we got to do is take the tension off of this belt. We do that on this this older Comanche design here. They've got a bolt here you have to loosen, and that allows you to take in and take out a big long bolt on this side that will move this pulley back and forth, and that will take the tension off of this belt. It's 13 millimeter. Don't need to take that all the way off, just loosen it. There's two bolts on the back side, one high and one low, that keep this water pump. So you crank this out till the belt's tight, then you tighten those two bolts to fasten the power steering pump in place. One you can access from above here if you remove the air cleaner hose. The other one you got to crawl underneath to get to, but there is enough room to get a box end wrench on it. So now that that's loose, we can pull this belt off and start getting after that water pump. Some cars, especially the newer ones, just inside here on the grill, there'll be a diagram showing the proper way to run the serpentine belt. This one doesn't have one, so I'm going to go ahead and snap a picture. Just a good idea to do that, because you never know when you're going to get interrupted, or maybe the parts you got are the wrong parts and you have to wait a day or two to get it put back together, and in a couple of days you come back to put it together and you can't remember which way that belt went on. So just snap a quick pic with your cell phone. Real easy way to make sure you get it back on the right way. If your serpentine belt looks like this, you need to replace it. Alright, now I got to get the pulley off of the water pump. So I'm just going to gently pry like that, because you got to reuse this pulley, so you don't want to bend it and warp it. But if you just work it real careful like that, then it'll come off. Alright, let's start pulling the actual pump off. There's two hoses that you're going to have to remove. One goes to the bottom of your radiator. This other one comes up and goes to the heater core, which is your heating inside the cab. They're just held on by hose clamps, so I'm going to go ahead and yank those off. Be careful when popping these hoses off. The coolant inside may still be pretty warm. Yeah, that's still pretty warm. In Matt's video on how to diagnose overheating, he talks about there being a spring in the radiator hose on the bottom radiator hose. That's what it looks like. You should have a big spring in there. If you don't, what can happen is under acceleration, this hose can collapse and starve the motor of coolant and cause an overheat. So you want to make sure that spring stays in there, or is in there, when you replace this bottom radiator hose. Before I pull that water pump off, I'm going to go ahead and flush the radiator and some of the system here. The thermostat should not be open, so I don't know that it'll actually go through the block, but it should clean out the radiator pretty good. Don't forget to wash out your reservoir as well. Here's a tip. When you're flushing the system, don't lean on the plastic overflow bottle, because it might be crystallized and rotten like this one is. And then you've just created yourself a big problem. Good thing I got Project Tetanus sitting right over here with one that looks like it's intact, and I'm going to be replacing it when I do the motor swap. So we'll see if we can't harvest one from Project Tetanus to get us running today. That sucks. Alright, I fixed my little overflow reservoir debacle with Project Tetanus. Sometimes you get lucky. Thankfully, Tetanus had the open cooling system and not the closed cooling system, or I'd have been in a big time pickle. Anyways, let's get after this pump now, finally. See if we can't get this thing out of here. I think there's just the 4. Well, I expected to find the blades of the impeller in worse condition than that, but if you look, they are definitely starting to contact the housing. You can see where they've scraped off. That's where all my little bits and shavings of aluminum are coming from. They're scraping off part of the housing. Why, I'm not sure. Maybe this this bushing is wearing out in here and it's not holding it. You know, maybe the tension of the belt and everything, it's pulling it this way now. This bushing is worn out and it's started to grind away at the housing. Either way, I'm confident that this is our problem. These Comanches, apparently, when I went down to the parts store, there were 4 different water pumps that were used on these Comanches. There were a reverse rotation, a standard rotation, and then another set of reverse and standard rotation, one for a serpentine belt, one for V-belt, or 2 for serpentine belts, 2 for V-belts. The reverse rotation, the water pump rotates opposite the crank. So I just started the motor and just looked at the way the pulleys moved, and I was able to determine that mine needed to be a reverse rotation, which they match. However, this one has this little pigtail cast into it. This one has a threaded fitting. So apparently I've got to go find a fitting that'll screw into that I can now attach a hose to. So back to the parts store. Well, I'm back from the parts store and they had this heater hose fitting that looks like it's the right size. Looks like it's going to do the job. Basically replace that piece that's cast into this one. So I think we're back in business. Now the only other thing I need to do from the old part, you got to transfer over these studs, these threaded studs, and I believe Matt has a video on how to do that, but in case you're wondering, I'll show you. So to remove a threaded stud like this, you just take two of the nuts, thread one on top of it. You lock the 2 nuts together like this, and then that will grip that stud, and you can thread it back out like that. It's a little bit easier to do if they're not flange nuts with these little lock washers on them, but it's still going to work just like that. Now while I still have the nuts on, I'm going to go ahead and move them to the new pump. Now to get the nuts off, you just grab 2 wrenches, just like that. I'll do that with all 4 studs. Alright, we need to clean off this mounting surface where the water pump's going to go back on so that the gasket gets a good, nice clean seal. That looks pretty good. Even though the water pump comes with a gasket, I am still going to use a gasket maker on both sides of it just to make sure that this thing seals up. This ultra gray high torque gasket maker is really nice stuff. Alright, let me clean that up a little bit. We'll be ready to install this. Alright, we're ready for installation. I already Cleaned up all my bolts on the wire wheel to get the rust and junk off of them. Make sure you don't cross thread them. Now, I couldn't find the torque specs for these, but from water pumps I've done in the past, generally they'll have you torque them to about 18 foot-pounds the first pass, and then torque them to about 22 to 25 foot-pounds the second pass. So that's kind of what I'm gonna do here. Now it's time to reattach some hoses. Alright, I've got the power steering pump bolted back up, got the bottom hose on, the heater core hose on. Time to put the fan pulley. And our fan clutch. The fan clutch and the shroud have to kind of go in as one piece, otherwise it can't get together. Sort of like that. Now go ahead and tighten up the nuts on the fan. These do not need to be torqued super tight, by the way. I think I got that right, but I'm going to check my picture just to be sure. Feels pretty good. Now we just add coolant and we're done. This is some Prestone, and this is the concentrate, which means I'm going to have to mix this 50-50 with distilled water. Highly recommend you use distilled water and not just tap water to prevent mineral deposits from plugging up your system. Alright guys, that wraps up the water pump installation. Just a couple of notes. I was able to back flush the rest of the system using just an old piece of hose. I shoved it up inside the heater core feed line here, and that back flushed the heater core and all the way the block and everything. So that worked really good. I was able to get to this side of the thermostat through the radiator and to the back side of the thermostat and the block through this heater core hose. So just that worked out really good. So far it's been running pretty good. It's actually running quite a bit cooler than it was before, so I think we've fixed our problem. Thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go visit BleepinJeep.com for all the best off-road how-tos on the internet. Stick with me. Next week we're going to get back to Project Tennis. Thanks.